folks you haven't met in Manhattan.
Two River Theater in Red Bank is staging an extraordinary world premiere, Pamela's first musical, Pulitzer Prize winner Wendy Wasserstein's last play. Although it was written more than 15 years ago, it's never been performed. Wendy was famous for her witty feminist plays, but this is a different kind of show.
About 20 years ago, our friend Wendy Wasserstein wrote a kid's book called Pamela's First Musical. Look, she was a playwright, but this was her first venture into writing a kid's book. And it's a terrific book. And when I read the book, I called her and said, Wendy, this would make a great musical. And she said, let's do it.
And so, Tony Award winner David Zippel became the lyricist for Pamela's first musical.
It's about a little girl going to her first Broadway show and how a Broadway musical can change your life. And the characters were people from the Broadway community. And it had a real wink to it and made fun of the community, but also exalted what is so wonderful about Broadway theater.
There's a poke at theater critics.
I don't care for sopranos, I like tenors even less. In every Edward Albee play, the first act is a mess. I hated West Side Story, and I really hate your dress. I know what I like.
A parody of Sound of Music in a play within the play.
Oh, I can see I have a lot of work to do here before I can make everybody happy. When you are orphaned and abandoned, you can look to Sister Maria.
Sister Maria.
And an evening with a famous producer.
I pick the cast, and then I boss them around.
You take a shot,
And if it turns out all right, well then the future looks bright.
or else.
The first thing we had to decide was who would be the composer. And I had someone in mind, but the first name that came out of her lips was Cy Coleman, who was exactly who I had in mind because he's such an iconic Broadway great composer.
Before a song can stop the show.
Before a song can stop the show.
And cause a thunderous ovation.
Cy was my hero before I met him, but he changed my life because the first Broadway show I ever did was City of Angels, and it was with Larry Gelbart and Cy Coleman, and we all won Tonys, and it was a great way to kickstart my career.
Two River Theater's artistic director John Diaz first became aware of Pamela's first musical when Wendy Wasserstein brought it to him when he was working at the Public Theater in New York.
She sort of burst on the scene with an early play called The Heidi Chronicles, which won both the Tony and the Pulitzer Prize.
I don't play on your team.
So what? Susan says no man really plays on our team. And no man isn't threatened by our potential.
And then she became this kind of titan of the theater, but then wrote a little children's book called Pamela's First Musical, which was meant to inspire young people like she herself had been to find their way to the theater.
But I won't go to pieces and I'll never quit.
We wrote it, and about 3 weeks before we were to start rehearsals, Cy passed away very suddenly. And then Wendy was diagnosed with cancer and ultimately passed away a couple years after that, and the show just wasn't happening.
Tony Award-winning playwright Christopher Durang stepped in to add some finishing touches and help guide the production onto the stage.
One reason I'm connected is that I went to Yale School of Drama with Wendy, and we were very good friends, and we also wrote some things together. So when Wendy died, she was 55, so it was just very, very sad. And it was a few years later that I was asked to work on this, and I hope Wendy's happy with what I'm doing.
Someone had a dream.
It's moving and heartfelt in many ways, that a show about a young girl wanting to kind of grow up into this life in the theater has taken about 15 years actually to happen, almost like the life of a little girl.